Hey there, Emmanuel here from WebDevFuel, and in today's video we're going to go over the question of Go being a language that's too simple. So recently I was on X or Twitter and I stumbled upon a bunch of different conversations that have been happening lately there, where people are saying that Go is a language that's too simple, that the language cannot really be used to do complex things, or that it simply lags behind other languages like, for example, JavaScript, Rust, or other languages. And by the end of it, I also want to debunk these points because I think Go is actually a great language and the simplicity of the language is a pro, not a con. So first, let's go over the common criticisms of the Go language and things that I sort of read online of people criticizing the language and saying it was not a good language for these particular reasons. First of all, they say that Go was created for inexperienced developers, and while I'm not really familiar with the whole history of Go or exactly how it was created, I've read also a bunch of different times online that the Go language was created by Google so that they had the ability to have new developers join a new team and be productive much faster than with other languages. And what this usually leads to is people saying that Go was created for quote-unquote dumb developers or poor developers, developers that are just not good at what they do. And I don't really think this is a fair criticism. I'm going to go over and debunk this point in just a minute. Now let's take a look at the next criticism, which is Go has too much boilerplate. One of the common criticisms, and here I sort of agree a bit more, but not completely. They say that Go has too much boilerplate. So when we want to accomplish something with other languages, the languages already have the necessary abstractions for us to not have to create a lot of boilerplate code and have to write things over and over again. And the final criticism is that Go doesn't have enough features. So one thing that is usually also talked about online is that Go only has 25 keywords. And that is something that I really enjoy about the language, but it is a common criticism that the language doesn't do too much. It has a type system, it does things well when it comes to packages and when it comes to building, but when it comes to the language itself, to the syntax, it doesn't have a lot of features, and we are usually doing the exact same things over and over again in Go. So now that we took a look at these common criticisms, let's go ahead and see why I think that they are not really 100% fair. And while they have a point, and I don't really think that anyone should be using a language that they don't like. If you like Go, you should use it. If you don't, you should use other languages. I think that's completely fine. And I don't really see a point in debating these things with so much emotion attached to it, because at the end of the day, these things are just tools if you like them. But before we continue, if you want to learn more about how to build web applications with HTMX, Go, and PostgreSQL, then go to webdevfuel.com/HGSB or click the link in the description down below. You can use them, if not, you don't have to use them. So let's debunk these points. First of all, an approachable language for beginners is not a bad thing. So if we take a look here at the criticism, people say that Go was created for inexperienced developers, and that's actually not a bad thing. If you have a team where new developers are able to join that team and start contributing to the projects and start helping right away because the language is simple, for example, people who are right out of college, in that case, this is a pro of the language. But if the language is too simple to the point where you can actually not do anything with it, then I would agree that yes, the language should be a bit more complex as to be able to also implement more complex features, do more complex things with the language. But in the case of Go, not only are new developers able to understand it because the language is very simple, but it is also used in very complex projects. If you take a look at Docker, for example, Kubernetes, and other projects in the web ecosystem, those projects are not simple things. But still, other developers were able to implement those things using Go, and it was a great language to accomplish that. And what I believe is that if other developers are able to build such complex things and such stable projects using Go, then there is no reason for other developers to also be able to do the same thing. Next, it's important to understand that boilerplate can be better than abstraction. Usually, as web developers or as programmers in general, we believe that we should abstract as much things as we can and as soon as possible. But the reality is that ends up creating more problems in the future inside our code base because our code becomes too complex too soon. And I think that sometimes it is actually better to simply write boilerplate, especially today with AI tools that can help us write things, or even if you type fast, then you can write things, write boilerplate, and accept that sometimes that makes more sense than abstracting things right away, which only creates more complexity. And then, for example, if we have a bunch of logic inside of a function, for example, and we try to abstract everything away so that the function, for example, becomes smaller. If we want to change a small part of that logic, we would have to make a lot of changes to our project instead of accepting that, okay, I'm going to copy this block of code in 2 or 3 different parts of the code base, and then it becomes simple to refactor and change things in one specific part of the code base without affecting the other parts because of the abstraction. So again, this is not a rule that is set in stone. Boilerplate is not necessarily better than abstraction, and abstraction is not necessarily better than boilerplate, but it comes down to the developer to analyze the code base and see what the things that the developer is trying to implement are, and then decide which one is better. So this criticism of Go, I don't really think is 100% fair also, because while Go, yes, has more boilerplate than other languages, as a result, it is also much simpler to understand when we write it and also when later we are reading our code. And finally, the mental overhead of a language takes us away from the problem we're trying to solve. When I'm writing Go, it happens a lot more than with other languages that I can get into the zone and I just create stuff. I just write code, I just do things, I just work towards the feature that I want to build, instead of worrying about the minutiae or the details of the language. I also really enjoy writing Rust, for example, and I also at the moment am writing a lot of Elixir. And in the case, for example, of Elixir, there are so many keywords and there are so many stuff built into the language that I always have to look things up, even after writing the language for a long time. And that is something that I really enjoy about the Go language. When I finally understood Go and I was able to be productive in the language, I was able to simply have a feature and get to the point, start writing the code and implement the feature, again, instead of having to constantly look up or trying to remember how something is done inside of the language, because in other languages, usually there are, first of all, multiple ways of doing the same thing. And then there are also implementations for us to be able to do something that we could manually do as programmers instead of relying on the language. So this is it. Again, I saw this conversation all over Twitter a few days ago, and I thought it was interesting for me to share my thoughts as to why I believe that these criticisms of Go are not really fair, and while they do have a point, and like I said previously, if you really don't like Go, if you don't want to write Go, then just don't do it. And if you enjoy Go, then I think you would agree with this point that I'm making here, because this is something that is very nuanced. We should be able to look at these pros and cons of each language and try to understand them and see exactly where each language fits better than other languages. So with this being said, I hope this video was helpful to you, and I'll see you on the next one.